Hello, so you're Tim Schafer. You've worked, you're all famous for Lucasarts, Double Fine, and the first ever Kickstarter to go over $3 million, is that right?
Maybe. Gosh, how did they put that? Were we the first to go over 3 million? We were like second to $1 million.
1 million in 24 hours.
We were 1 million 24 hours.
Or was a goal 1 million in 8 hours.
We got a Guinness Book of World Record. We can look for that one. It definitely set some records, and it was a big milestone, but and a big surprise to a lot of us. My name is Tim Schafer. I'm the president and CEO of Double Fine Productions. We've been making games like Psychonauts and Brutal Legend for the last 17 years, and before that, for the 10 years before that, I was working on adventure games at Lucasarts Entertainment.
Can you tell us a little bit about how you got into LucasArts and the whole story about the comic strip and the alleged pirated copy of Ball Blazer?
Well, I had spent my whole life playing video games ever since the first, Magnavox Odyssey my dad brought home, the first home console. Always playing video games and then working on making them, and then I went to college and studied computer science. And I had no idea what I was going to do with my life still. I didn't think it was possible to get a job in video games. And I was at the Career Center at University of California, Berkeley, and they had a job for people who could program and also write. And I've been getting really into creative writing, and I had entered a short story contest for engineers, and I won first place in the short story contest. And so I was able to put that on my resume. And I applied, and so maybe because of that, they called me back, and I got this phone interview with David Fox, who was doing the interviewing. And he asked me what kind of games that LucasArts had made that I liked, and I really loved this one game. It was played like a chessboard with these different futuristic type cars that would catch a ball. It was like a soccer game. And I was like, I really like Ball Blaster. And he's like, Ball Blaster, huh? And I was like, yeah, it's really one of my favorite games. He goes, well, that's what it was called when it was pirated. The pirated version was called Ball Blaster. The real game is called Ball Blazer. And I was like, oh no, because I had played a pirated version of this game because I was 16 and I didn't have any money, and I played it. And he's like, for some reason he still was like, well, send in your stuff with a cover letter saying what your ideal job was. And I was like, oh, I've blown my one chance to work at LucasArts. But because I thought I had lost the job, I felt like I had nothing to lose, so I just made this elaborate adventure game on paper, like a text adventure of someone trying to find their ideal job. Like you apply, you're at the Career Center, you have a choice of this job, or this job, and it was like about me trying to find the job at LucasArts. And the art was bad, and it didn't look that amazing, but somehow it got me to go to Skywalker Ranch and interview for the job, and then eventually got hired.
And what were the first things you started working on when you got to LucasArts?
When we first got there, they wanted us to learn their proprietary scripting language, which was called Scum. And Scum was called Scum because it stood for Script Creation Utility for Maniac Mansion. Maniac Mansion was the first adventure game that LucasArts had made. So Ron Gilbert had designed this whole language to make it easy for people to write in a more natural way, not like a C program, but more like English, like walk over to the window and say this line of dialogue and just make it more intuitive so they could make these really narrative, cinematic, movie-like games quicker. And so we went to Scum University, which was this one room where the four of us, Scumlets, as they called us, sat in a room and learned Scum. And we played with some old art that was just some art that Steve Purcell had made for Sam Max. The game wouldn't come out for years in the future, but this was like just for us to play with, and we would play with that and learn this language. And before that, I had been, studying C in college, and Pascal was also something they taught in college. But Scum was simpler, but it was specific to adventure games. And so I learned that, and I programmed in that for years, and eventually forgot all about C and forgot all about Pascal and all my other programming languages. And I used that language exclusively until Grim Fandango, when we used a language called Lua, which was invented at the University of Rio, and it was another scripting language. It was even more flexible and still used to this day in games.
So what was the first game that you worked on when you were at LucasArts that was like the one that you took the lead on, and how successful was that?
When I first got there, they didn't have any programming work yet ready for me, so I tested on the Indiana Jones game. I was a tester, the action game. And then after learning Scum, Ron took me and Dave Grossman and put us on Monkey Island, The Secret of Monkey Island. And I wrote dialogue for it and helped with design on that and Secret of Monkey Island 2. And then Dave and I got a chance to make a sequel to Maniac Mansion called Day of the Tentacle. And we ran that project. And we really wanted to make it a big deal, like a living, like Chuck Jones cartoon, like a Warner Brothers cartoon. And that was a lot of fun to work on. And then after that, I got to do my own game, which was Full Throttle, set in the world of outlaw bikers, where you're the leader of this biker gang, accused of a crime you didn't commit, and on the run from the law, and all those kinds of exciting things. And then after that, I was really inspired by the Day of the Dead from Mexican folklore, and I wanted to make a story about the quest of a soul crossing to the ninth underworld, the land of eternal rest, as described in the folklore, because it seemed like such a great quest to go on, and so full of evocative images and challenges. So that was the last game I made for LucasArts.
What was your relationship like with the rest of George's kind of with LucasArts and Lucasfilm, with the fact that you got all these properties to play with, but you were making your own stuff? And I know there was like later on you'd start making Star Wars games, and obviously you said you worked on Indiana Jones games, but you also come up with your own stuff as well. What was that like when
we had kind of a perfect little storm, if you will, of like a bunch of things happened that created a bubble of creativity, a kind of little magic window, because we were well funded and that we're sitting on all of George's Star Wars money, but we were not allowed to make a Star Wars game because they had licensed the rights, I believe, to Parker Brothers or another Atari, or some other company had the rights to make Star Wars games. So we couldn't make Star Wars games, and so we just had to make up stuff. And you know, Monkey Island and The Dig and Loom and all these games just had to be created because we couldn't use the Star Wars properties, which is amazing because nowadays when you want to do stuff that's not licensed, it's really hard to get funding for it. So this was this great opportunity to just be as creative as we possibly could, and it led to just the creation of one crazy IP after another.
And what was your relationship like with Sierra? Because I know that you two, was it kind of like a competitive relationship, and was it actually quite a serious one, or was it kind of like a little bit tongue-in-cheek? Because I know there was a lot of jokes in the games, like the one where you fall off the edge of the cliff in Monkey Island and you see the Sierra-style dialogue box coming up. Yeah. And what was that like? Were you just... And you both had very different styles. Because I know that in the early games, it was possible to go through an adventure game and then realise that you needed something that was right back at the beginning, right when you're at the end. Or But I think you could jump out like playing Zach McCracken and things like that. So what was that relationship like with Sierra?
We it was different back in the early days because there wasn't this connectivity. There wasn't the internet where you would just be tweeting. Nowadays we'd be tweeting at Roberta Williams and going back and forth. It was very separated, and we would meet them, rarely. At GDC, the Game Developers Conference, you might meet them, but there wasn't a lot of back and forth. So we were really isolated in this little bubble. But we were very aware of the King's Quest games, and we were very jealous of how much they sold, because they sold hundreds of thousands of copies, which was really crazy to us. And yet we didn't want to make straight fantasy stories. We didn't want to, just wasn't our taste to do high fantasy. We wanted to do unusual things like pirates, or the crazy stuff in Day of the Tentacle and Day of the Dead. Just bring new things in that haven't been done a bunch of times. But even though those games are well regarded, they were never as successful as a King Quest game. So we always felt like, this time we got to do it. We got to catch up to King's Quest, and we always felt like we were chasing that. And years later, I would meet Lori Cole, who was one of the original designers back there in the Sierra days. And she would talk about how we always felt we were chasing LucasArts because they always got better reviews, and they just like, it just was so frustrating. And so it was just kind of funny that we both had this rivalry that made us, kind of pushed us to do better in just totally different ways. And in the end, we all ended up, friendly with each other.
I used to play I really loved the first 3 Space Quest games, like 1, 2, and 3, like the original ones before they converted them to VGA and did the point and click. But then when they started doing the point and click with 4, it felt really buggy compared to the LucasArts game. It didn't feel anywhere near as kind of as nice to play.
I never played a King's Quest, Space Quest. You mean they used to click and then you type?
No, it wasn't. It was full point and click.
But before that, what did they do?
Oh, before that, it was like you'd move the character around, so it was like your arrow keys. Oh. So you just use your arrow keys to walk around.
That's
and then
funny.
it's like, and then you basically would type underneath, and you would constantly type in like look or examine or whatever you need to do to interact with the background. But it was very much like a text adventure with a graphic on it. But then the thing that was a real pain was that you could actually fall off ledges, whereas in Monkey Island you could go, say when you're walking around the edge of the governor's mansion, you'd basically like click on the governor's mansion and then you'd walk up there. Whereas with Space Quest, you'd have to use the arrow keys to kind of position the character to move them around, otherwise you could fall off ledges and you hadn't saved, then going back to where you last saved each time.
Yeah, and that was Ron Gilbert's design philosophy, because if you've ever watched him like try to use an ATM machine or check out at a grocery, like he's just so mad when something's not convenient. He's like, why can't I just press this one button? You know, he always wants to simplify things, and so I think when he play adventure games and you had to type a lot and you had to look up and down in different places and click in the just right spot and use just the right word, it'd drive him crazy. And so he simplified. You just click on the mansion, the character walks there, because that's not the interesting part of playing an adventure. It's like, can I follow the twists and tails of the road? No, that's not exciting. So skip all that.
So you because I noticed in the Double Fine as well, he was quite fussy with when he first played Broken Age. Mm-hmm. You were sitting there having a discussion and he went through the notes and he basically said, I think it was something like, I found it relaxing to play, like he enjoyed playing that sort of game because he hadn't played that sort of game for a while. Mm-hmm. And then it's like, and then he like flipped the page, or he like went down and he goes, now I want to tell you what I don't like. And it seems like he's very fussy, like he's a hard man to please with regards to that kind of thing.
He is a hard man to please, that's fair to say.
Yeah. What was the catalyst for you leaving LucasArts and starting up your own venture?
After 10 years at LucasArts, I just felt ready to start my own company. I wanted to have my own culture. You know, at Lucas, you're part of a very big company, which has its own, it's all about Star Wars, you know, it's all about, a little bit about indie. It's a giant thing that I felt like it'd be great to have just my little team, like I had on Grim Fandango, just that little team separate and really not answerable to anyone else. And so I just leapt out and just didn't know, I didn't have any plan or anything, and just leapt, and then I had made some money from Full Throttle, so I had some money in the bank. I got a royalty off that, which was great, and I put all of that into starting a new company, and just happened to be around the time the Xbox was launching, the original Xbox, and they were, Ed Freeze was running that, and he was talking about how games should be like art. They're art. Games are art, and I believe that as well. That games can be more than they currently were, and so we got to talking and decided we wanted to make a game for the original Xbox, which was Psychonauts.
Going off on a slight tangent there. Do you know that Ed Freeze rewrote Halo for the Atari 2600?
Yeah. I've never played it, but I've seen screenshots of it.
I've got a box copy of it.
Oh,
it's like,
he sells it?
He sells it, yeah, you can buy it on a cartridge. It's like he had a meeting with someone from Microsoft, one of the other guys he used to work with, and he he was worried about the fact that he'd used the Halo property without actually asking permission. So he kind of like had a meeting. He goes, "Oh, by the way, do you know I've done this?" And he was a little bit worried about telling them. They go, "Yeah, we know you've done that, and no one cares that you've released it on the 2600."
But they're losing a lot of that money that they could have been getting from the 2600.
He sold like a few hundred copies or something.
I should get one.
So, have you ever thought about doing something like that, like going back and like writing something again for like an old platform? I guess I know you're kind of PC, so it's like.
No, I think about writing for the 2600 a lot, because that I did learn assembly language on a 6502 processor, which is what the 2600 uses. I learned on the Atari 400, Atari 800 system, which is the same as the Commodore, same as the Apple had, and I thought I could do it, and I longed for that kind of simple days when like your dragging character was just a series of these bytes. It was like 10 bytes high, and you'd have to just figure out what the bytes looked like by what you were drawing, and you'd put that in there, and it would be like your dragon was as big as a piece of code, and your memory was just so much easier to manage. You'd do it by hand, and those kind of simple methods for making games seem really refreshing. So I think about it all the time, but we're pretty busy with a new game, so yeah. I'll have to let that market wait.
Yeah. So moving forward again a little bit, for Broken Age, or it wasn't Broken Age then, at some point during Double Fine you decided to go out and do a crowdfunding campaign, which ended up being possibly one of the most successful crowdfunding campaigns at the time. Can you tell me a little bit about the decision behind going into to do that crowdfunding? and also why you think it was so successful.
Yeah. A few years before that, or a year before that, so a year before it actually happened, I was contacted from someone from Kickstarter. It was like, you should think about doing a Kickstarter. And I asked our business guy at the time, like, what's Kickstarter? And he's like, it's this crowdfunding platform. The highest grossing stuff is like $5,000. It's like really not feasible for games. I was like, okay. And then this crew called Two Player Productions called us up, and they were making this documentary about Minecraft over there. And they wanted to interview me for that documentary. And then we got to know them through that. And then their next project, they were like, hey, let's do a documentary about you guys. And that sounded cool because I really believe in, opening the curtain and showing people what game development's like. Because I think it's really mysterious to a lot of people. Even people who play a lot of games have no idea how they're made or what people go through to make them. So I was excited about the project, but not excited about having a publisher because publishers never approve raw footage of game development because they want it to be positive, like a marketing material. And we both wanted to make a real documentary about the ups and downs of it. So we decided to crowdfund the game too. So it was kind of an afterthought. Crowdfund the documentary and then crowdfund the game so we wouldn't have to answer to a publisher. And then I was thinking an adventure game would be a good thing to make because we have had people ask for that. Why don't you go back and make an adventure game? You used to make them in the 90s. We missed them. No publisher will make them now. So it was a perfect setup for crowdfunding because crowdfunding is great for that underserved niche where people say they want a thing, but no one's willing to take a risk that enough of them will show up with their money to make it profitable. So crowdfunding lets you get that money in advance and prove that there's a demand for it. And this demand came out of the blue. Like we knew there were some people who wanted an adventure game, but I think a lot of people just liked the idea of this happening, and it really inspired a lot of people, and they blew it up and gave us so much money and all this support, and it was great and really changed how we interact with our community forever.
How did you find the way that you did interact? I know you had some problems in there as well. You had the whole thing with like the press embargo where you kind of like, I guess it's like this is sort of like a then versus now question. So it's like, what was it like? What's it like now using something like crowdfunding when you're answerable to backers and the press is kind of a lot more, you've got less control over what gets out there now versus what you would have had back in the LucasArts days?
I feel like things are really unsettled right now because streaming and YouTube and Twitch has taken a lot away from regular games journalism. A lot of that, everything's in flux, it seems, and none of the old rules really apply. And we were doing this new thing of being really transparent while we were showing people what was going on during the production, so they could see and comment on how we were doing, which was really unusual. And there were a lot of expectations and a lot of misinformation. A lot of people didn't understand what crowdfunding was, or how we were getting that money, or what we were doing with it. A lot of people were very suspicious. Then some crowdfunding campaigns went really bad. Some people canceled their games, and we announced that we were going to be spending more money on it than we originally planned, and people thought that was weird sounding, didn't like that, and so there were a lot of ups and downs. But then we eventually finished the game and we shipped it, and it was good, and so we were able to show that crowdfunding is a real, ultimately a really positive impact on games and allows things to happen that wouldn't have happened before.
What about the peripheral stuff you just mentioned there, like Twitch? Feels like actually quite a useful thing now as well. And I noticed in the documentary that you'd sit there and watch on Twitch straight away to see what players were doing and like how they were playing the games. Yeah. I guess that feels like.
I mean, streamers are just a fact of life that people are going to be playing your game, and it is a little strange because you make a game, you put a lot of love and care and a lot of creative decision makings and inspiration and amazing heroic things happen during development to make this giant work of art. You take it and you put it out there, and then someone else will put it on their channel and then make a bunch of jokes in front of it and make more money than you do. So there's a lot of questions about that's odd, but it's just the way things work now, and so we're all trying to figure out a way to work with that to give people what they want, because people want to watch those videos. They want to check out games before they buy them. It's hard with story-based games, because if you watch a whole story-based game, like a linear narrative game on a stream, there's really no reason to play it afterwards because you've seen all the content, basically. So for a lot of games like Minecraft, it really works really well because you see them do their thing with it and you want to do something completely different. So for different games, it has a different impact. And it seems like a lot of stuff is still in flux. And it's still just people making money doing a thing that didn't exist a few years ago. And it seems like people could change the laws or do something, business could change its policies to make all of a sudden that whole career go away on accident, or change. And so who knows, just 2 years from now, who knows where that's all going to be.
Which one do you prefer? Do you prefer now or do you prefer then? Is it just like, in terms of like Lucas,
what years are you comparing?
So at the moment, is it quite nice having that iterative, like I know you work in Agile as well, and like you're constantly showing little snippets of things, and then you can make decisions to release, like with Broken Age as well, you kind of release one half of the game, and then the second half of the game later on, and you can do bug fixes, but you're constantly talking to people as you're going through, like you said, you've got that transparency. When the old LucasArts days, it would be kind of, I guess you're sitting there, no one's really seeing much apart from the odd expo or the odd magazine cover disc or something.
In the old days, people wouldn't see any coverage of a game until it came out and it would be in a magazine. And it would take so long to make a game. Like Psychonauts took 5 years. And we would go so dark, we would go so quiet in development that every time I released a new game, it was always written as a comeback article. Like, Jesus, you thought he was gone forever, but they got a new game, and now people are more in touch with development. They expect updates, especially crowdfunded games, because they've given you their money and they want to see an update. They don't want you to go dark for 5 years, so you have to show them things. But we kind of split the difference now. Instead of showing every month or every 3 months a new documentary, we're filming and we're releasing small updates on a regular basis, and then closer to the end of the project, we release a lot more of the footage of it. So we have some time to think, some time to be creative and private, and then some time to show people the good stuff when it's ready.
So how much do you code now?
I code not at all.
Yeah.
It's like a foreign language where if you don't learn it, you just forget it.
Yeah.
Like I don't know if I could bust out any C code for sure, or even I could probably still do Scum.
Yeah.
If I had to.
At a push. So which have been your favourite games to work on? And which ones have you learnt the most from?
Hurt the most.
But learnt the most from?
Oh gosh, it's really hard to pick a favorite. Obviously, we've done some really silly ones like this Connect game we did, where we made it in just, almost 6 months to a year. Very short development cycle, and then it was just when you play it, kids can jump around in a big ball pit or a lava pit in their own living room, and that was a lot of fun. Completely different than anything else we ever made. Psychonauts was really hard to make. Like it was a very nasty crunch mode, and so a lot of them are more like war stories. They're more like we survived it. Oh my gosh, we banded together and we survived it, and we learned a lot from every game for sure.
Have you played Thimbleweed Park?
You said they're not going to be any gotcha questions?
Yeah. That's okay.
I haven't played it yet.
Okay.
I mean to. How is it?
It's brilliant. I loved it. Yeah, I really enjoyed it.
I was waiting for the PS4 version, but I think that's out. Right?
I couldn't bring myself to play it on my PS4 just because it felt like I needed to play it with a mouse. It didn't feel right using a joypad for that game.
That makes sense.
But yeah, I thought it was awesome. It was really good. Yeah, what would your recommendations be for people trying to get into the games industry?
Well, you know how like when people ask you how to get into, they ask rock stars how they get into the world of music, they say practice, and I kind of want to not say that, but it's true. You should. You can download something like Game Maker or Unity or Unreal and just watch a few YouTube videos about how to make your own game and just start prototyping ideas. But you also playing a ton of games is where I get a lot of my ideas, is by playing other games, but also things outside of games like books and movies and music and travel are always really inspirational to me. But I think no matter whether you're trying to get a game made independently or trying to get a job at a big publisher, just producing a game yourself and showing that you can finish a project, you'll learn more from doing that on your own. It's really, really valuable. And there's tools that you can do it all by yourself, even if you don't know how to program or don't want to learn how to program. So just do it, kids. Just do it.
So it's not important to know how to program anymore?
No, but programming is fun. I think people should give it a shot because some of my just happiest times have been just, programming is this really quiet thing of just, you're just making something work, and it's really pleasurable to make something work.
And just one last question about remastering.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you find that, and are you using some of the old assets or anything from the previous version when you're writing something like Full Throttle again? And I notice in Full Throttle and games like that, you make it so that you can flick between a pixelated version and a smooth cartoony version.
Yeah.
Are you using any of the old assets, or is it just basically like a pixelation?
No, it's
effect that
so we remastered some of the old adventure games we made in the 90s, and the old version of the game is completely intact. Like the old sounds, the old video quality, everything, the pixel by pixel, it's exactly the old game. But then you press a button and it's been remastered, and we've redone the art completely. We've remastered and remixed the music, sometimes re-recorded live instruments versions of the old synthesized tracks, and we added commentary. We try to see it as like doing a Criterion edition of a Blu-ray of a movie, like try and add back the best quality version of the thing, but also add in things that you didn't have the first time around, like concept art, and kind of build the context around like who were the people making that game, and the things that surrounded that work of art, like what fed into that being what it was at the time, so you can kind of see it in its time and get to understand the team that made it.
Did you enjoy doing those, the remasters, or did you do the new?
It was really fun remastering those old games because we got the crew back together, like a little reunion to do the commentary, and we got to save a lot of assets that were kind of disappearing and crumbling. Like people found flat files of art that were like on their side in a warehouse in Oakland. They just be able to find that stuff before it vanished and was eaten by rats, and scan it all and digitize it. We like re-digitized audio from tapes that were about to just crackle into splinters, And so it was just the right time to do all that. So the people were still alive that could tell you about what it was like, and the assets had not vanished into dust.
So is it hard negotiating? Do you have to negotiate with Disney for that?
We had to negotiate with Disney, and Sony was involved in this one, but we were lucky enough that people who worked at Disney and Sony were big fans of those games. We met people there who really wanted to do it, and they were like, this is the right thing to do for players who love these games, and we wanted to do it, so we lucked out.
Would you ever consider going back to try and do another Monkey Island? Because I know that's one of the things that keeps coming up. Ron Gilbert said he wouldn't do it unless he had full control, and he wouldn't want to really negotiate with Disney, and he wouldn't even do like a Monkey Island but call the character something else. He's like, if he was going to do Monkey Island, he would do Monkey Island.
Yeah.
Have you ever
I understand why Ron feels that way, because you want to own it, and I felt that way for years, and I didn't want to do it, but I'm really glad eventually we did, because I had total control over those remasters. We got to take care of both the games and the players, respect the people who wanted to play the games again, but do it in a way that was either authentic to the old version or remastered to a new version. And then we actually got to make money off them, which we never got to do in the old days. They sold, Grim Fandango sold more in its new version than it sold in its own version. So people still want to play those games, and so that was it was worth it in the end to go through that.
Should you think you'll drag anything else out of the Disney archive to make a sequel to?
We would not be against doing more of those remasters, but only if the original creators want to get involved. So if anything's going to happen with Monkey Island, it has to be Ron doing it. But if any of those other creators want to do it and Disney wants to do it, we would definitely be up for that.
So if conversations come up with you and Ron doing a Monkey Island?
He's pretty busy with that.
Yeah.
Thimbleweed Park stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. I think that's
cool. Awesome. Well, it was good
brilliant.
talking to you.
Thank you for that.
Awesome. Good.